Okay, thank you everybody for joining us for today's BlazeMeter webinar, Performance Testing with BlazeMeter, New and Advanced Features. Happy New Year to everyone. This is our first webinar of 2017. Before we get started and before I turn things over to our presenter, I'm going to just make a few announcements that are important. Firstly, today's webinar is being recorded. And generally, if everything goes okay, we send out the recording the day after the webinar. So tomorrow by email. If not, it'll be by the end of this week. So you will receive a recording to all people who registered. Secondly, at the end of today's webinar, there'll be about 10 minutes for questions and answers and time for your questions. You can ask questions in your GoToWebinar control panel. Try to save the questions for a little bit later. That's what we're hoping to do it on, but obviously if you see something that you're interested in while it's being presented, you can put it in the questions box and we'll read them out later. Also, I'm not sure if we're going to have time to get to every single question, so try to keep them on topic, but also know that we do have all the questions that are asked, that we can look at afterwards. And if we don't have time to answer it, and if it's relevant, we'll try to answer it by email later. Finally, final announcement. At the end of today's webinar, you'll be prompted just to fill out a short 30-second survey. If you can please take the time to do so. It's really short, and it'll just help us get your feedback about what you thought about today's webinar. If you'd like a follow-up with us, and it really helps us to make these webinars even better in the future. So with that said, I'm going to now turn things over to Dave Caro. He'll be our presenter. Dave, over to you.
Thanks so much. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. My name is Dave Caro. I'm a Senior Principal Product Marketing Manager here at BlazeMeter, and pretty excited to be able to share with you what's new and notable about BlazeMeter. And let's take a look at the agenda real quick here. So, excuse me. So we'll start with sort of BlazeMeter in one slide, and that's really only the kind of just to catch people up who may be new to BlazeMeter. We'll spend just a minute or two just kind of refreshing what is BlazeMeter, why did we create it. Then we'll go with the meat of the webinars, what's new and notable, and then where you can learn more. And I've got some extra resources that I want to share with you. And then we'll try to leave plenty of time for Q&A. So here's that one slide about what is BlazeMeter, right? First, democratizing performance testing in the continuous delivery era. And what we mean by that, democratizing is just really making something accessible to more people and evening the bar so that everyone has a say and can get access to the tool. And the continuous delivery era is really a world where flow is more important than queues. You don't really want to be waiting in line for something. You don't really want to be handing off to a silo somewhere else. The goal is you should just be able to get your hands on a tool and use it almost no matter what your function is. So this is kind of gets away from the traditional performance testing model of having a small focused group that does all the testing to a model where everybody can do testing. You may still have experts, but you want to democratize and have as many people be able to do their own testing as possible. So what is BlazeMeter? So it's a software as a service and on-premise performance testing platform. It's designed to help DevOps and Agile teams begin doing web, mobile, microservice, and API testing early in the software delivery lifecycle, right? And reuse these tests all the way through to production. So the idea is to get started earlier, to not have load testing be something that's done at the end of the development cycle, but something can be done really with your very first build. So what is a little bit more about BlazeMeter? So BlazeMeter is a pure SaaS solution. There's no installs, there's no downloading. There's really, you just kind of put your browser blazemeter.com, put in a couple of pieces of information, and you're into a free account, and you go from there to even all the way up to a very large account. We're focused on 100% open source compatibility, and we take this really seriously, something we call load and go. And the idea is that if you have an open source test that works on your desktop or in any environment already, and it works, you should just be able to load it to our system and go. You shouldn't have to rewrite it, you shouldn't have to refactor it, you shouldn't have to move things around, you should just be able to load and go. And we started with JMeter, and we've moved on to 9 different tools that we support. And so we take the open source compatibility really seriously. Though we're a SaaS solution, we know that you have testing needs that may require that you be in, outside in is public cloud. Virtual private cloud is really the development lab of the future, which is where people are doing their development in the cloud, but it's in a private firewalled off area. And then the traditional behind the firewall scenario where you're doing something in on premise. And we can support all those situations. Again, you want to be able to start early, but you also want to be able to scale up to any size. And so we want to make tools which are inherently good in small volumes work better in huge volumes so that you can use the same tool all the way through. So JMeter on its own doesn't really scale too big without using a lot of cloud resources. And when you're using a lot of cloud resources, there's a big coordination effort that would have to be done if you're doing it by hand. And we make that super easy. And then the last point is that we have a performance test orchestration tool called Taurus. Taurus is an open source project we launched, which is designed to work both locally and in the cloud. And it lets you do automation your way, quickly, simply, in human readable code. Taurus is very cool with that. So that's your one slide overview of BlazeMeter to catch you up if you're new to BlazeMeter. So let's focus then on what's new. I've got quite a lot of material here, and I want to make sure we have time for Q&A, so I'm going to move fairly quickly. But my goal is to expose you to interesting topics that you may want to follow up on, and then we'll give you multiple ways to follow up as needed, so, starting with Q&A, but also going on to talking to a human one-on-one. So the first thing that's new is actually, ironically, the changelog. If you scroll to the bottom of our homepage, or any page on our site, you can click on the changelog link. And this will take you to a fairly common thing in the SaaS world, which is that each time we push a release, we tell you what we changed. And this is in reverse chrono order, and so you can scroll through here and see what we've done for you lately or what's new. Something we've experimented with lately is actually embedding videos right in the changelog so that you can see what's changed, and we do that particularly where we think there's major navigation differences or new features exposed. You'll see whenever we add new locations, you'll see them here. We'll talk more about locations later in the webinar, and on and on and on. And we started this in June of 2016, and so if you go back to the very bottom of this, you'll see that in addition to the entries that happened through the summer on page 2 here, there's a section that talks about all features that were initiated before June 20th during 2016. So it's the first half of 2016 is all in one very large section here. So that's the changelog. It's on the public website, and it's just down there in the footer. So then let's move on to part 2 of what's new. The new dashboard, the new user roles, and new workspaces, which builds on the organizations feature which we had previously. So here is what you now experience when you come to log into the app. And what we've done is to streamline this dashboard so that it is, pardon me while I move something out of my screen here. Give me one moment here. We've streamlined the dashboard so that at a glance you can see the recent test runs, easily get to one quickly, easily get to the tests that have been most recently updated, and see your usage report. Now this account hasn't been up that long, so it doesn't have bar and bar of all the different usage, but this is kind of a quick summary of your usage. What you won't see here anymore is numerous buttons that all led kind of the same thing, which was starting a new test. That's all consolidated under this. So if you click on Create Test, you see the types of tests you can create, and you have the ability to define which project you create the test in, and off you go. Let's talk about user roles. So a feature people have been requesting for a while. You know, we started out as a SaaS solution that individuals and small groups used, but inevitably large organizations had lots of small groups and wanted the ability to manage users in sort of an enterprise app way. We've added features over time to address that, but in this most recent release that we've done at the end of the year here, we've added user roles. And if I go to the Users tab here, you'll notice that when I go to invite someone, I can choose whether they be an admin, billing, or standard role. Admin obviously has powers. They have all the powers of an owner, except they can't close the account. Billing is very limited. It can just see usage. And standard is a typical user. I can assign them a workspace, and we'll talk about workspaces in just a minute. And I can choose a role. And here's where the role-based permissions come in, which is if you're a tester can create tests, do pretty much all the work you need to do. A viewer can only view. They can't actually, if you want to give somebody access to view, but you don't want to make sure they don't accidentally start a test or delete something, viewer is basically a read-only role. And manager has the ability has additional administrative powers, right? So we're trying to still keep it simple, but address the key use cases, which is a sort of a read-only user is pretty important when you want to give access to somebody to have a look at stuff, but you don't want them to kind of mess with it. And then workspace, if you're familiar with organizations, organizations was a way of gathering work, tests and reports and the like in a separate group to keep things kind of tidy. Workspaces is that idea, but made even more powerful, which is that all of the configuration that you're used to in the product is now done on a per workspace basis. So you have members in a workspace, you have APM credentials in a workspace, you can even configure alerts, which basically can let you know if someone in the workspace has, say, created or launched a very large test. You can send an email to someone just to let them know. Usage reporting, things like dedicated IPs, private locations, and pre-launch cloud engines. These are all advanced features that are now grouped on a workspace basis. What's on the near-term roadmap is the ability to actually allocate a portion of your entitlements, the capacity you've purchased, to each workspace in a particular ratio. So we do that manually for you now, but we're actually going to give you the ability to do it in the UI in the near future.